I am very pleased to be here in Verbier for the very first time. For my first invitation here, I play 2 different concerts. The first one I played yesterday, 2 big romantic sonatas by Franz Schubert in A minor, D784. And the second big sonata is the Liszt Sonata B minor. I felt very comfortable during my performance. It was in the church, so very intimate atmosphere. Not big audience, but very concentrated, very attentive. And now I'm already preparing the second concert, which will take place on the 4th with an impressive team, because I play with Henning Jensen, Misha Maisky and Thorleif Tedeen for the Messiaen quartet that I will also play with Martin Frost. So I am more than honored to work with such musicians. First, I didn't like this A minor sonata. I think it's a piece that is hard to love because the language, the musical language in it is very harsh and very tense and very terse. Not very pleasing in any way. Huge contrasts, some brutal places, but I progressively fell in love with it because of the depth. And then I found it interesting that this sonata is completely isolated from the cycle of the other sonatas by Franz Schubert. He composed it after having the first signs of syphilis, after knowing that he's sick and that he will die probably very soon. So the atmosphere there is very, very, very dark and hopeless. And what is very interesting is that Schubert wrote a poem that is called Mein Gebet, that he put together with the sonata, in which he asks for the peace of death. And you can find in this sonata the fight, the struggle of the man that still wants to live and who is crying to just ask for more years to live. But at the same time, there is the contrasting theme that is like in Liszt sonata. That's what I wanted to put in parallel, playing the 2 works together, is that for the Schubert sonata it's also one single theme. The major variation of the theme is something we can relate to the peace of death, like now floating somewhere and just resting. It's almost impossible as a pianist to never approach the Liszt sonata, because it's like at the same time all the improvements of the piano technique, so very pragmatic aspects, and at the same time the full spirit, the full philosophy of the romantic era, the big romantic era in the 19th century, like the ideals of the man, the artist being the scale for everything. The Prometheus, actually. The man that wants the same power than God and actually fails. When I think about the first page of the sonata, I always think about the Fritz Lang metropolis, because you see this huge city and this single man that rules the city, and he's completely lonely in his office and contemplates his work, but he's completely helpless and he has not the strength to really lead this. And when I hear this ta-tom, pa-pam with the 2 octaves, any notes and parallel notes like this, I see like skyscrapers, from something going from the ground to the sky, or the contrary, falling from the sky on the ground. And then from this very, very impressive introduction, you have a series of variations, always combined with the sonata form, the big sonata form. So you can recognize something like a big first theme and a big second theme, but actually there is only one single theme. I think that the real difficulty of this piece is how to interpret it, how to make any bar strong, how to make it speak. It's not a matter of pleasing the audience or the critics, it's a matter of making any note speak something. And of course you have many indications on the score, but sometimes it's better to not strictly follow it, to make it really speak and to make it clear. So I have some choices and some bits that are not exactly what is written. Sometimes I divide the tempo because I feel the need to articulate the form, to put in relief what comes before and what comes after, because it's a piece of half an hour long, that has some very, very strong articulations, and it's not always clear on the score. It will be the third time I will perform it. It's a very challenging piece, but not speaking about the technique, because it's like a tradition to always point the finger on the technical aspect, mostly about the piano literature. But this piece, of course, has some technical difficulties, but most of the difficulties are musical, because you can consider this is a work still impressionist in the writing. There are some effects with pedaling, tonal pedal and right pedal, some writing with chords swifting, with some modal harmonies. But at the same time, there is a very modern aesthetic that Messiaen has already developed. It's a mature work. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he has found his style and how to organize it to create a big piece. Messiaen himself was very, very inspired by spiritual matters. He considered himself as a very, very strong Catholic, and so the whole work is inspired by some mystical subjects. The piece is not in the traditional 4 movements chamber music piece, it's in 8 movements. And Messiaen says himself it's like the 7 symbolic figure plus another one, 8, which symbolizes the symbol of eternity. And it ends very peacefully with the most melodic movements of all, with just a violin solo with piano accompaniment. It's just like a scale to heaven, to the sky. It's an incredible piece to just go out of this pragmatic and material world, because it's all out of here. We are somewhere else from the first notes. It will be the first time that I perform the 2 Shostakovich trios with this team. I am very excited about it. I think that for these pieces, it's not like for Messiaen, there is not specially something to think before playing. It's very important to feel the energy of each musician and to try to find something, to find a kind of tension all together. The 2 trios are very different, and they are very representative of 2 periods of Shostakovich writing. The first one is one of the few very romantic pieces of Shostakovich. He wrote it when after falling in love with a young lady when he was having holiday in a thermal center. He fell in love with this lady and dedicated this very, very passionate trio in only one movement that is quite rhapsodic, because in only one movement you have a lot of change of tempos and change of atmosphere. But it's the same line. On some beats, the writing, it's already experimental, but mostly harmonically. There are some harsh harmonies that Shostakovich will later develop much more. But most of the trio is very, very romantic and passionate. But there is always this cynical, this spirit of comedy, burlesque, and something like dark humor. It's already very, very present. And the second trio is inspired by something completely different, because Shostakovich lost his best friend and dedicated this incredible piece, one of the really total masterpieces. And in this trio the mood is very, very dark and very hopeless, but with some humor here or there, mostly in the scherzo. That is really just like smashing, something very brutal and at the same time humoristic and fresh. The most impressive probably in the trio is the Passacaglia, the third movement, and the fourth movement, and the recapitulation of the whole piece. The final movement is really, really a success of mixing some elements of folk music, Jewish folk music, together with still the traditional romantic rondo sonata form. You can find 2 big themes organized like a rondo with a verse, then recap, and verse and recap. And there is a huge climax, very, very impressive. It's amazing how Shostakovich managed with only a few elements to build such a climax, such powerful moments in this piece, because the writing for trio, I had a little experience because I composed the trio myself. It's very, very difficult to deal with the dynamics with this instrument, how to make these 2 string players going together with the piano that has so big power, but to repart the job between the musicians and to create one sound, one trio sound. It's incredible what Shostakovich reaches, especially in the finale, because you have really something that is perfectly balanced and so powerful that you got the impression to hear a full orchestra.